Wayward Wayne Ford has a love-hate relationship with women.
This guy had an obsession with breasts.
His brother Rodney tries to keep him on the straight and narrow.
He always thought he was smarter than everybody else, and he could get away with certain things, so he tried to do stuff.
But when misogyny turns into murder,
he does it repeatedly while he's torturing and choking and raping her.
And that's when he began to dismember her body in his bathtub of his trailer.
Rodney is forced to clean up the mess his brother has created.
He told me he'd done something bad, he hurt some people, and he didn't want to hurt anybody anymore. That's about when it started to hit me, what was really going on. That's when all hell broke loose.
Wayne Adam Ford has trouble controlling his emotions. And when they finally boil over, his year-long grisly murder spree leaves body parts strewn around Northern California. The only person in his life truly able to tame this wayward soul is Wayne's older brother, Rodney.
We were real close. I mean, brothers. We were all we had, basically, each other.
As children, their father's career keeps the family on the move, so the boys learn to rely on each other.
My dad was in the military. We lived in Massachusetts. We lived in Eureka. We lived in Petaluma. I mean, all, little towns all over the States. From East Coast, West Coast. We were often left to our own. Did everything kids did. We'd go hang out at the beach, when it was low tide, we'd go walk way out on the coral. Just exploring, hunting for fish, different stuff, things we could find. Go out in the woods and investigate stuff, just being kids.
But despite being raised together, they are two very different boys.
When Rodney and Wayne were growing up, they were close because they were brothers and they were moving around a lot, but by the same token, they were very different. Their personalities were different. Rodney was very outgoing, Wayne was very introverted. He was actually very emotional and got very upset very easily, very sensitive.
My brother pretty much hung around my mom, stayed in the house, mama's boy.
But their parents' marriage is an unhappy one. While the family is stationed overseas in Okinawa, their mother attempts suicide and begins to have affairs. After returning to California, Wayne and Rodney's parents divorce. The change is especially hard on young Wayne.
I think partly the fact when they got divorced is when we got back from overseas, we were finally all together as a family. Then they decided to get divorced. I just don't think he was happy.
After the split, the boys both live with their mother, but it's not long before the situation changes.
I think that he just started acting out, like a 10-year-old would with his mom.
Wayne's mother decides to send him away to live with his father.
I don't know, she just didn't want to be a mother anymore, I guess, because she couldn't handle his attitude.
Rodney soon follows, and the brothers continue their close relationship.
When I finally went to live with my dad, he was pretty much, a single guy, had girlfriends, always out all the time. He knew I was pretty much independent, and I would take care of my brother. So just like, go do the grocery shopping, go to school, make sure your brother goes to school. For me, it was fun because I was pretty much on my own anyway, and I was just taking care of my brother. And we had a good relationship.
As they grow into teenagers, their tight bond continues.
If he'd get in a little trouble, I'd always help him out. And if I do something like take the car when I wasn't supposed to, he wouldn't tell.
But the teenaged Wayne's troubled behavior gets worse, and he seems unable to control his baser impulses. He relies on his older brother Rodney to put him back on track.
He went to the local Ace Hardware store and he broke into it. He went in through the skylight in the middle of the night, took a rope, came down through the skylight, stole a bunch of stuff, and brought it home. There was a big article in the paper about how the place had gotten broken into.
Hey, check this out. What?
My brother's like, yeah, I did that. And I'm like, really? And he says, yeah. And he showed me all the stuff that he'd taken out of the Ace. I said, why'd you do it? And he says, I don't know. It was just something fun to do. He always thought he was smarter than everybody else, and he could get away with certain things, so he tried to do stuff. Well, he knew that I would tell my dad he did it, so that's where that went.
Rodney tries to straighten out his wayward brother, but eventually Wayne graduates from petty theft to stealing a car. And their father ships him off to the military.
I think he was 17. My dad signed for him to go, because at that point he was pretty much a problem child, and my dad figured the Marine Corps would straighten him out.
The move is a success.
We grew up in a regimented atmosphere with my dad being in the military, and it was something my brother was comfortable with, and he excelled. He did really good.
Wayne also starts dating a young woman, Kelly, and his life seems to finally be on track. But in 1980, 19-year-old Wayne suffers a terrible setback. While out driving one night, Wayne stops to help when he runs across the scene of an accident.
So he went over to the car to see if he could help, and he found the victim on the passenger side was bleeding at the neck. So he put his hand over the victim's neck to block the blood from coming out of the carotid artery. And in the process, a drunk driver came out of nowhere and hit him. Knocked him 40 feet down an embankment, which landed him in the ICU, knocked a piece of his jaw entirely off, had to have it sewn back in. He was in the ICU for 9 days.
I remember my dad getting the call from the Marine commander at his base, telling him that my brother was involved in a bad accident and they didn't know if he was gonna make it.
The accident marks a turning point for Wayne.
After he came to visit me a couple of times with Kelly, I just noticed that there was a bit of a change. He was a little bit more short, more impatient about things. He was just more adamant about doing things his way. It just wasn't, my typical brother.
Wayne and Kelly marry in the spring of 1981. But soon after, Wayne begins to exhibit dark sexual urges that strain the marriage. Like Christian Grey in 50 Shades of Grey, he pushes his wife to engage in bondage and other S&M activities.
After the accident, Wayne's behavior started to change. He became more and more abusive, more and more obsessed with sex, and he treated Kelly like a sex object. He went so far as to ask her to pose in these strange, tied-up poses. He also wanted to put a sheet over her with just her breasts exposed, and he wanted to make wax molds of her breasts.
Kelly does her best to meet her husband's increasing demands, but she's not happy.
Their marriage was in trouble. Wayne suddenly became apologetic and suggested that they go to marriage counseling. They met separately with the therapist. The therapist heard Kelly's side of the story and didn't want her to go home with Wayne alone. In fact, she told them to try living separately. The problems persisted, Wayne didn't change, and in January of 1983, Kelly asked for divorce.
Wayne has an extreme reaction to the breakdown of his marriage.
He stalked her, he went crazy, he wanted her back, she was just trying to escape.
Kelly moves twice, but each time Wayne tracks her down, writing messages on her windows to let her know he can find her. Eventually, Wayne is admitted to a Naval Hospital's psychiatric ward for depression.
And of course, he blamed all of his difficulties on Kelly.
Ultimately, Wayne is returned to active duty, but when his divorce is finalized a year later, he once again has a breakdown.
He'd attacked an officer and beat an officer up. Hurt him pretty bad, I guess. So they threw him in the jail. They medicated him because he wouldn't calm down. because anytime anybody would try to interact with him, he would just go off the deep end.
Wayne's moods were all over the map, up and down, black and white, and he was diagnosed with severe and chronic borderline personality disorder.
2 months later, in January 1985, Wayne is deemed psychologically unfit for duty and discharged from the military.
After reporting to the doctors that he had ideations about killing his wife, he was ultimately discharged and deemed a danger to himself, to others, and to government property.
In my opinion, if he had a medical problem or a mental problem, they should have helped him with it. Instead of just discharging him, I don't think they should have just turned him loose.
But Wayward Wayne, officially considered dangerous by the U.S. military, is now out on the streets. Something is not quite right about Wayward Wayne Ford. Disturbed by his kinky sexual demands, Wayne's wife Kelly divorces him, and Wayne goes into a tailspin. Despite being deemed a danger to himself and others, Ford is discharged from the Marine Corps. Wayne's older brother Rodney is usually the one to help Wayne get his life back on track when he strays. But this time, Rodney's own military career keeps him away.
We didn't have a whole lot of contact for like a 5 or 6 year period there. Most of my focus was on my own life. You know, when you get busy with life and raising a family, that's pretty much what you do.
Rudderless without the advice and guidance of his older brother, Wayne drifts around California for years.
He didn't really know what he wanted to do, so he did a little bit of everything. He lived on the beach. He had different jobs, being a mechanic, tow truck driver. I mean, the whole gamut of short employment at different places. He came to live with my dad for a little while. That didn't work out. They didn't get along. So he went back to Southern California.
He went from job to job, couldn't hold anything down. He delivered papers, he worked as a security guard, he even drove a school bus for disabled children.
Wayne continues to exhibit the same disturbing fascination with women's breasts that he had when married to Kelly. His girlfriend allows him to poke her breasts with safety pins during sex.
He also confessed to seeing a teenager on the street, grabbing her purse and biting her breast.
In 1993, Wayne, still living in Southern California, reaches out to older brother Rodney once again, when a dispute with a neighbor leads to violence.
He'd been arrested and got in some trouble for discharging a firearm. There was a tow yard behind the house that he rented, and the tow yard had a couple of Dobermans in it. Well, I guess they had gone through the fence, so he took a shotgun and shot the dogs. His girlfriend called me because she knew we were close, and if anything could be handled, I could probably go down there and handle it for him. After about a year's worth of court battles and attorney fees and everything else, they wound up dropping the charges, and he got his weapon back.
From then on, Rodney and Wayne begin to spend more time together.
He's my brother, and I loved him, and we go do something. We go four-wheeling, we go camping for a weekend. Some of my buddies, some of his buddies, we get together.
When Wayne meets a new woman, he seems to pull his life together.
When he met Elizabeth, they had a good time all the time. They were always going out, doing their thing.
But with his brother's troubled romantic history, Rodney is cautious.
After his first wife, Kelly, and the ugly divorce that they had and all the stuff that they went through, when he told me that he wanted to get married again, I said, you shouldn't do it. I could just see the handwriting on the wall. It wasn't going to end well.
Despite his brother's misgivings, Wayne marries Elizabeth in October 1994 in Las Vegas. Rodney agrees to act as best man at the wedding.
When two people decide they're going to get married, there's not much you can do about it.
Seemingly older and wiser, Wayne's second marriage starts off strong. In less than a year, Elizabeth is pregnant with their first child.
When they first got married, everything was great. And at that time, I think that's why he started going to law school, because he was going to become an attorney. That's what he wanted to do.
But in reality, history is repeating itself.
He had some very, what she described as weird sexual habits. He would want her to have sex with other men, and he would supposedly watch. He wanted to pierce her nipples at one point and would take safety pins and poke them. And things just kept getting weirder and weirder in their relationship.
In August 1995, when Elizabeth is 5 months pregnant, Wayne begins to exhibit violent behavior as well, when he has an extreme reaction to an argument.
He chokes her with a belt, he hits her with the belt, and he rapes her. She's so scared, she runs out of the apartment.
Elizabeth agrees to take Wayne back, and 4 months later, she gives birth to a son.
My brother thought it was great to be a dad. That's all, all he wanted. Then he had a boy, and he was happy.
But when Wayne's sexual requests continue to escalate in both frequency and violence, Elizabeth decides to leave him for good. Distraught about the breakdown of his second marriage, Wayne once again turns to his brother, Rodney.
You'll see your son.
My brother was really emotional about having a son, and at first, when they broke up, he got to see him. And then she decided she was going to move back to Vegas, which is where her dad was. And then that just put more distance. And then for him to go see his son on visits became less and less. It was hard on him. He'd be upset crying, saying, hey, she's not going to let me see him, and I really want to see him. And it just wasn't a good thing. I told him he just needs to get out of the situation, get away from it, clear his head, move forward with his life, get a job.
But Wayne can't get past what he's lost and lashes out in anger.
He'd say stuff like, oh, I just want to, kill her, which is, I've heard a million times from different other guys, and I never thought much about that being a definite threat.
She took him! My son!
Just like he had with the breakdown of his first marriage, Wayne becomes obsessed with his ex-wife.
He was angry at his ex-wife, Elizabeth, for what he claimed not allowing him to see his son, which was an excuse because he had opportunities, he just didn't exercise them.
Wayne doesn't see his son for a year until his birthday, when he comes to visit, but Wayne doesn't really seem all that interested in being with his son. He really just wants to focus on Elizabeth.
As Wayne's anger with his ex-wife grows, he once again loses control.
So he had lost his wife, and he had also lost his son, and it sent him into an unbelievable tailspin.
But this time, without the military to lock him up and medicate him, Wayne goes completely over the edge.
In October of 1997, a photographer went out with some friends when all of a sudden they saw a white object in the water and thought initially that it was a mannequin. When he touched it with his oar, however, it was squishy and yellow and not a mannequin, but a body.
The victim had several stab wounds about her back and right side, most of which were inflicted after death. Both breasts had been removed. She had no arms, no legs, no head.
Wayne had met his victim a few days earlier.
Wayne was driving down Broadway in Eureka when he met about a 25-year-old young girl, troubled, clearly on drugs. She wanted to go to the beach. So he agreed, and somewhere along the line, he raped and killed her.
During that sex act, she died, we believe by strangulation. He panicked at that point, didn't know what to do, and that's when he began to dismember her body in his bathtub of his trailer.
He cut off all of her limbs. He sliced her up in a number of different ways. He took the pieces, he stuck some of them in the freezer.
The breast that he had removed, he actually put them in the oven and cooked them and was storing that fat in a coffee can in his trailer.
Due to the state of the body, investigators aren't able to make an identification. The victim is dubbed Torso Girl. Wayward Wayne has found a terrible outlet for his pent-up anger with the women in his life. And when Wayne finally does take his brother's advice and gets a job, it's one that will allow him to continue his new pursuit undetected.
Wayne's new job as a long-haul trucker with a 45-foot flatbed and a sleeper cab allows him to go wherever he wants, up and down California and into Nevada, without anybody knowing where he's going or what he's doing, and he's allowed to meet as many women and pick up as many women as he wants to along the way.
Wayward Wayne Ford is distraught over the breakdown of his second marriage.
My brother was really emotional about having a son, and at first, you know, when they broke up, it was hard on him.
Wayne has a history of losing control of his emotions. But this time, when his anger boils over, he picks up a woman on the street and goes too far.
He panicked at that point, didn't know what to do, and that's when he began to dismember her body in his bathtub of his trailer.
Like a scene right out of Silence of the Lambs, Ford removes his victim's breasts, cooks them, and stores the fat in a jar in his trailer. Sensing he's gone too far, Wayne reaches out for help.
He goes to a mental health clinic. He tells them he's depressed, he's not sleeping, he's crying, he feels hopeless. He doesn't know what to do. They diagnose him with depression, and they suggest that he come back for a follow-up visit and have some counseling before they try medication, but Wayne never comes back.
Instead, Wayne gets a job as a driver at a long-haul trucking company, giving him the freedom to indulge in his darkest impulses.
He seemed happy. I mean, he didn't complain about much. He said he liked his job, he liked being alone.
Wayne's new job as a long-haul trucker with a 45-foot flatbed and a sleeper cab allows him to go wherever he wants, up and down California and into Nevada, basically without anybody knowing where he's going or what he's doing. Wayne met women at rest areas, he met them at truck stops, he met them just about anywhere along the road. They were troubled, they were drug users, they were most often prostitutes.
Wayne also once again stalks and harasses his ex-wife, who now lives in Las Vegas with their young son.
Wayne and Elizabeth's divorce and custody arrangement are finalized on April 15th of 1998. He's supposed to send her $200 a month in child support, but he's either doesn't send it or he sends it late. And he calls, but he hangs up, and all Elizabeth can hear are these clicks on her answering machine. And when she does answer, he's not there. Finally, though, they do connect by phone, and Wayne just wants to talk about how it was her fault that their marriage didn't work. And then curiously, he mentions that he had been in Las Vegas just a week before.
While in Las Vegas, Wayne finds another victim.
He's driving down Tropicana Boulevard, and he pulls over and picks up this young, blonde prostitute named Tina Gibbs. He says, "You want to go for a ride?" And she says, "Sure." So he takes her for the ride of her life.
But their wild sex quickly turns violent. Alone with his victim, Wayne is able to indulge in the dark sexual fantasies rejected by his ex-wives.
He chokes her. She passes out. He revives her with CPR. And he does it repeatedly while he's torturing and choking and raping her until finally she's just gone and doesn't come back.
Wayne keeps her body in the truck for days, eventually disposing of it along the California aqueduct.
Tina's body was found on June 2nd in the California aqueduct near Buttonwillow in Kern County. Her body was naked and so bloated that they had to use special techniques to get her fingerprints.
Between June and September, Wayne kidnaps and tortures 3 more women.
He says that he was really trying to give them pleasure. Erotic asphyxia is what it's properly called, where your orgasm is heightened from a lack of oxygen by pressing on the carotid artery. The interesting thing, though, is he said he was upset when they started crying, even though he was burning them with lighters, choking them, hitting them with belts, torturing them. He said it was for their pleasure, but in fact, it was really for his pleasure. Some of them survive. He ties them up, leaves them by the side of the road, and drives away.
The nature of Ford's job as a trucker helps him escape detection by law enforcement, even as the victims continue to pile up.
The fact that he's a long-haul trucker, Wayne can escape detection when he picks up these women and tortures these women and rapes these women. Nobody knows.
Trying to track somebody like that or find somebody like that because they're so transient and not from the area is difficult, and yet the victims also sometimes are reluctant to help identify that because they just want to get on with their life and move forward.
And with murders committed in different counties, it makes coordination among law enforcement officials especially difficult. On September 20th, 25-year-old Lynette White disappears from San Bernardino County.
Wayne is driving through Fontana where he picks up this young woman, turns out to be a mother of 2. She gets into his cab. They start talking about their babies. The next thing you know, they're having sex. Wayne chokes her, brings her back with CPR, and she doesn't come back.
With Lynette's body in the sleeping compartment of his truck, Wayne makes the 7-hour drive from Fontana to Vallejo to pay an unexpected visit to his brother, Rodney.
I thought it was kind of unusual. He stopped by to have breakfast, and he said, hey, you want to check out my truck? You want to see the inside of the truck? And I'm like, no, it's a truck. I've seen 100 of them, you know? And he said, oh, yeah, you need to see the inside of my truck and see the sleeper compartment and the radio, you know, the gear that he has in there. I just kind of blew him off, said, no, I'm not really interested. We were done with breakfast. We're standing in the parking lot. And I said, I need to get back home. I didn't learn until later he had a body in the truck.
Based on the fact that Wayne asked Rodney to come and look at the stolen sporting goods in his closet when he was 15, it seems likely that he was trying to get caught.
Maybe he was trying to let me know that he'd done something, and he wanted me to find out, wanting to get caught, didn't want to hurt anybody anymore, and I didn't take the bait.
A few days later, Lynette's body is found in nearby San Joaquin County, naked and floating in an irrigation ditch. Wayne's feeble attempt to stop his horrific actions fails, just as it did when he skipped out on his psychiatric appointment after killing his first victim. But all that changes after Wayne picks up another young woman on the side of the road. By October 1998, Wayward Wayne Ford is a bona fide serial killer, leaving 3 dead and at least 3 other tortured women in his wake. His job as a long-haul trucker helps him remain undetected by law enforcement. Wayne's brother Rodney has no idea how depraved his younger brother has become.
He was always on the road. He was long hauling. He would stop by, we'd go out and have breakfast. I'd see him like once a month. He seemed happy.
Wayne's ability to present as a regular person helps him lure in unsuspecting victims.
Wayne was, for lack of a better word, I would say normal. He functioned well in society. He got along with other people. Neighbors liked him. He was just a very quiet person. Kind of guy you'd probably sit down and have a beer with if you met him.
But in reality, Wayne is a twisted, troubled man who tortures and dismembers his victims, cutting off their breasts before discarding their bodies.
This guy had a fascination with, or an obsession with breasts.
In October 1998, Wayne picks up 29-year-old Patricia Tamez.
Wayne was driving through Victorville when he saw this girl standing by the side of the road who lifted up her t-shirt and flashed her underwear at him. So he, of course, had to drive around the block, come back, and pick her up.
Like he did with his previous victims, Wayne repeatedly chokes and then revives the woman while he rapes her, until eventually she stops breathing.
And once again, he takes her and takes her body, cuts off her left breast, and dumps her into the aqueduct near Hesperia, very close to where he picked her up.
But after his year-long pattern of killing and then remorse, Wayne has had enough.
On November 2nd, Wayne spends the day in a bar, getting drunk, playing pool, and basically telling the bartender that he just wants to get a gun and blow his brains out. While he was at the bar, he called his brother Rodney to come and help him. He said, "I need you. You need to come."
As he has throughout his troubled life, Wayne turns to his older brother to set him back on the right path.
When I got the phone call, my brother was incoherent, just rambling, not making a whole lot of sense. He told me he'd done something bad, he hurt some people, and he didn't want to hurt anybody anymore. I've never heard him that upset before.
Rodney makes the 6-hour drive from Vallejo to Trinidad, California, where he's greeted at 1 in the morning by a physically and emotionally distraught Wayne.
When I got there, it was kind of an emotional thing, and I didn't really know what to expect or what was going on. And we went in the room, and I knew it was my brother, but it didn't look like him. And I guess he'd been living in the woods for like 3 or 4 days, totally unkept. Didn't smell too good. That's when he started telling me about a lot of the stuff that he had done. It was kind of surreal, like I kind of left myself and I was kind of looking at the whole situation thinking, wow, this can't be real. I'm not sure I'm believing that he did some of the things he said he did. I knew he'd done something. I mean, he was in that shape for a reason. I didn't know if he'd been drinking, drugs. I had no idea what was going on. I said, well, first of all, go take a shower, get cleaned up, we'll get some rest, and then we'll hash it out in the morning, and then we'll go to the sheriff.
In the morning, Wayne seems like his old self.
He felt better. We went and had breakfast. And then after we ate, he said, hey, there's some things I want to do before we go to the sheriff's department.
Wayne is not in any hurry to get to the sheriff's station, so he says, let's go drive around and look where we used to live.
There was a zoo in Eureka. We used to go there when we were kids. He wanted to go to the zoo. He wanted to go see where my uncle's old house was. Just kind of, you know, drive the neighborhood, drive around town, and revisit and do some of the things that we did when we were younger. Like a guy having his last meal before he gets executed. I mean, he figured we probably weren't going to see each other anymore after that for a long time, and so that's what we did.
Then he says he wants to go to a movie. And then finally Rodney says, that's enough, we're going.
He knew I'd turn him in. That's why he called me. Knowing what I knew and what he told me, there's no way I was going to let him walk. Just no way. What would have happened if I let him walk and then he killed somebody else? I'd have that on my conscience. At that point, I just kind of compartmentalized what I needed to do, what had to be done, and that's what I did. Focused on the objective.
On November 3rd, 1998, accompanied by his brother Rodney, Wayne went to the Humboldt County Sheriff's Department and told the on-duty sergeant and a deputy there that he had something he wanted to talk about.
I'm just worried about what he did.
Wayne and Rodney's visit surprises the police.
My brother was crying, incoherent, just babbling, you know, and I said, well, he wants to turn himself in. This is what he told me. This is what he's done. And that's when they said, well, you know, we don't really have any proof. We don't, you know, does he just need to go to a hospital?
Wayne then claims that he does have proof.
When he said I have proof, it's like, just like he flipped a switch, so everything, it was totally different. He was sitting there having a conversation, telling the sheriff, oh yeah, I got evidence you want to see. Once you see this, you'll believe me. And that's when the sheriff said, what do you mean? And my brother started reaching his pocket. And he said, don't move. He looked at me, he unleashed his revolver, and he said, you don't move. I'm like, no problem. He told my brother to take his hand out of his pocket real slow, so he did. And he says, what do you have in your pockets? Do you have anything sharp, anything that's gonna stab me? My brother said, no. He said, if you just reach in that pocket, there's a baggie in there. You pull the baggie out, you'll have all the proof you need. The sheriff pulled the baggie out, and that's when all hell broke loose.
After a year of torturing, murdering, and dismembering victims, Wayward Wayne Ford is desperate for a way to stop. He reaches out to his older brother Rodney, who has helped rein him in the past when he's lost his way.
He knew I'd turn him in. That's why he called me.
But when Wayne and Rodney show up at the Humboldt County Sheriff's Department, the police are skeptical.
He said, well, without any proof or any reports or any, there's nothing much we can do. And my brother said, well, I'll show you some proof. He said, if you just reach in that pocket, there's a baggie in there. You pull the baggie out, you'll have all the proof you need.
They reached in, pulled out a baggie of what looked like raw chicken, and it turned out to be a woman's breast.
If somebody showed up with a body part in a plastic bag in their pocket and handed it over to me, I would definitely have some serious questions for this individual.
For Rodney, the moment is life-changing.
It kind of all, clicked and sunk home that this is happening. It's not a feeling you can really describe. You don't want to be there, but you're there. You're involved in something that most people would never, ever even have a clue or even think about being involved in.
But Wayne's horrific actions paint a target on his brother as well.
It's not every day that two guys walk in and one guy says he wants to turn another guy in for killing people. And then they produce evidence. And then the police, you can't blame them. They're like, okay, what's going on here? And they're brothers. How far does this go? Where does it end? Police by nature are suspect of everything. That's their job. So they're looking at me. They're looking at him. They cuff my brother, they take him away, and then they put me in a room and question me. We were in there for a good hour. He took my statement. He asked me some questions, and then I told him, I said, look, I know where you're going, I know what you need, but I would like to talk to my brother to make sure that there's no one else right now that needs help.
The distraught Wayne has stopped talking to the police, but he'll talk to his brother, Rodney.
I just needed to know if there was, any other person or persons that might need help that could be saved. And he just told me no. He said everything that's done is done. There's nothing else can be done.
Rodney is released by the sheriff's office, but his ordeal is just beginning. After spending the night at his uncle's house in town, he begins the long drive home to Vallejo.
I started driving home. I knew I was being followed, and I don't blame them. I mean, they want to know. They want to know where I'm going, what I'm doing. Is he going, you know, to another crime scene? You know, they got to know. They followed me all the way back to my house. That's about when it started to hit me, you know, what was really going on. Of course, when I got there, the news media was camped out on my doorstep, so we had to leave our house. They scared my wife and my kids, beating on the door, demanding answers. I have a wife and 2 babies, you know, trying to make ends meet. You know, it's just the pressures of everything in life, and then you have something like this, you know, dumped in your lap. It can be overwhelming. The hardest part was, you know, I got to tell my dad. I knew it was going to devastate my dad. And having to leave your house, having your whole family, you know, disrupted. Then the feelings set in about, what about the other families, the people that my brother did this to? You know, there's nothing that I can go through that's gonna ever compare to what those people have to go through. I mean, they've lost a loved one, so whatever I'm going through is probably nothing compared to them. But I just know that what my brother didn't just devastate their families, it devastated mine.
I truly believe, had it not been for Rodney's assistance and moral support for his brother Wayne in turning himself in to Humboldt County, that these cases would have never been solved.
Though his crimes span 4 different jurisdictions, Wayne becomes the first defendant to face prosecution under California's new serial killer single trial law.
If a person commits a crime in one jurisdiction and continues to commit crimes throughout different jurisdictions, any place having jurisdiction over that can take responsibility for all crimes. San Bernardino County ultimately charged Wayne with 4 counts of murder in June of 1999.
But it would be 7 years before the case finally goes to trial.
There were a number of motions made by the defense, but one of the primary reasons was these confessions that he gave without an attorney. The judge finally threw some of them out and kept some of them.
My brother's private investigator and my brother's attorney at the time were both against the death penalty. They were trying to stop my brother from getting the death penalty. My brother wanted the death penalty.
The trial finally begins in March of 2006.
At the conclusion of Wayne's trial on June 27, 2006, a San Bernardino jury found Wayne guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder for the victims of Tina Gibbs, Patricia Temez, Lynette White, and Jane Doe, also known as the Torso Girl.
He is sentenced to death. For Rodney, the conclusion is a double-edged sword.
Do I feel guilty because at some point my brother may be executed and I'm gonna feel relief because I don't have to deal with it anymore? There's such a range of stuff that goes through your head. He's my brother, I love him. I don't like what he did. I don't agree with what he did. He's sitting on death row and he's where he belongs. I didn't put him there. My dad didn't put him there, he put himself there. And I love him. But I think I love more of the memory of who my brother was to me. You know, not what he is now.
Rodney finds that the key to moving forward is to have a strong support system.
If you got a drug addiction problem or alcohol problem, you go to AA, you go to a drug program, you talk about it with people that have the same experiences, same stuff. I've never seen any type of support group or anything for people that are in my position. It's tough. I know how tough it is. I'm just fortunate. I have a lot of things to help me cope. Beautiful wife, you know, kids, a good relationship with my dad, a career. Other people in situations like this maybe don't have the same things. Maybe they don't have anybody to talk to. I'd be more than willing to help people. I mean, because I like to help people. That's what I do.